What do you mean jellyfish aren't animals too? Hey viewers, just before you get into this video, I have a little disclaimer for you. In this video and in part 1, you're going to see me handling some empty Powelliphanta snail shells. Now I just want you to know that it is in fact illegal to handle the empty snail shells, something that I wasn't aware of. It's a finer part of the laws around interacting with these animals. This is because it can be quite difficult to tell whether or not there's a live snail inside what looks like an empty shell. That means you can be prone to moving the shells elsewhere and then the snails get taken out of their safe environment, and you know, snails don't really move very fast, so it's going to take a long time for them to get back home. Also, other live snails rely on decaying empty shells to get their minerals, which they need to grow their own shells. Since videoing, I've cleared this footage with the Department of Conservation as they agree that they should still be shared because they're providing value to the species in the form of an educational tool. However, this disclaimer is to say, please do not do as I did without first speaking to the Department of Conservation. The last thing we want to do is cause these endangered snails any harm. I'm also very experienced in working with endangered New Zealand wildlife and being in New Zealand forest at night time, so don't try this stuff at home. Okay, that's all. Now enjoy! We have giant snails in New Zealand. I'm here for the snails. I've come to Karamea to find their snails, their giant land snails. Over the next 3 nights we're going to be going out every night looking for these giant snails. They are very rare, most of them are endangered, and they only come out in very specific weather conditions. So basically we're going in blind and we're just going to see what we can find. We found a snail shell. Look how big! Native snail, I think. Hi.
So cool.
So we're in what's called the moa caves. And these are, I think, collectively called the honeycomb cave systems, and this is where people discovered moa bone remains. Apparently 6 out of 10 of the species of moa in New Zealand were found in this area, which is pretty amazing. Also Haasts eagle that used to hunt moa. They've found Haasts eagle remains in these kinds of caves before. What a cool place to be right now. I love New Zealand. Alright, so we're back at the track where we were the first night, and we were just going to go for a loop walk during the day to see if we could find some more phil and some other birds, and look who bloody shows up! I did see the bottom of his foot, but it's pretty unlikely that he will come out during the day. They're a nocturnal species and it's actually really rare to see them during the day. So I feel so lucky that we've been able to actually find one that's alive. Why do we care about snails? Well, these snails in particular really interested me because they've been around for such a long time. Some scientists think as long as 80 million years. It's before the dinosaurs went extinct. It's before human ancestors were even living in trees. So long before that, these snails were crawling around in New Zealand. And they can tell us a lot about what New Zealand used to look like. One of the examples that I read online is that by looking at the different species of snails in the Horowhenua and the Nelson Tasman region, they could figure out that there used to actually be a land bridge between these two areas. You know, if you know where one species is and where another species is, and they might be closely related, but today they're only found in parts of the country that are really far away from each other, then maybe there was a bridge at one point. If we know that, then we can infer how other species of plants and animals might have existed in New Zealand as well. So there's so much you can learn from snails. If this is the closest I get to seeing one of our giant snails, I'll be pretty happy with that. Looks like he's about 6 centimeters. It is quite hard for these snails to coexist with humans, and so some of the threats are introduced predators. In this area in particular as well, along the west coast, mining has been a huge problem for them as well. So we're at a place called the Denniston Mines, and I just want to tell you a little story about how snails and coal mines don't mix. So this area has been mined for the last sort of few hundred years or so. In the early 2000s, Coalco wanted to mine a mountain that's close by to us now, Mount Augusta, and they sold a whole bunch of it before they actually started mining it. And that was a problem, because then what was discovered was there was a new subspecies of the giant snails living in this area, and somehow the mining company got through a lot of environmental loopholes where they didn't have to worry about these endangered snails that they found in this area. We tend to favour money over endangered species a lot of the time. But somebody pulled them up on it, and they had to get a dock permit eventually. They had to provide minimal support for these snails in an area for them to live in. And what they ended up doing was removing a whole bunch of the snails, moving them into fridges, and kept there until a better habitat could be found for them. And there were two kind of different stories here. So they found P. Augusta, and then they also found another species of these snails because they wanted to mine another mine a bit further along called Happy Valley, and there was a lot of protesting. People were chaining themselves to train track to try and stop the trains from carrying coal around the area. It was a whole big thing. Do you want to know the kicker? So the vegetation is still taking a long time to grow back, and the snails haven't got anywhere to live, and it's been that way for about 10 years. The coal company went bust. They lost about $400 million. It cost about $7 million to upkeep the snails, and then $10 million to do the initial moving of them all. And it's a state-owned coal company, and so we are the ones that have to pay for the accommodation for these snails that should have never been moved, and also for Doc to continue to care for them today, which luckily only costs about $50,000 a year. So basically it was all for nothing, and that's why it's super important that we continue to protect the snails that are still in their natural habitat. We shouldn't value money and material gain over something as special as 80 million year old snails. And that's the tea. Okay, we're on the beginning of the Heaphy track, and it's really rainy, but it feels like a really snaily kind of night, so we're going to start looking more of a tropical kind of forest with lots of Nico palms and stuff. And yesterday we found quite a few shells just on our walk down here, so hopefully there'll be a live snail here. Whoa! Yep. We found another shell. Empty, but it's a real big one. Look. Another one. That one's empty. Another decent size. A little bit smaller than the one we found earlier, but so we've been walking for about an hour and a half, and we haven't found any live snails yet, but lots of empty shells. And we've done this track, and we're going to loop around and do it again since there's been so many shells around. If we can't find any, I'll go back and check that one that we found earlier today, but I'm not super keen to do that because it's such a long, bumpy ride out there, but we're going to do it for the snails. Oh my god, Hayden's found one! And it's out of its shell! I hope it stays out of its shell. Okay, I've got to go check. It's like fully stretched out, and it's so massive, and he's looking around and stuff. It's so cool. amazing! I am so stoked we found one. It's been 3 late nights of searching for these snails, not knowing what we were going to find. It's blimmin' hard looking for animals in the dark, let alone getting the specific weather conditions for these snails. These snails are rare, people. Like, I really wasn't sure if we were going to find a live one out of its shell, let alone having it crawling around looking at the camera and stuff. So awesome, and it really made taking the whole trip out here worthwhile. Like, what an amazing experience to be in the presence of a species whose ancestors have been in New Zealand for 80 million years. The generational knowledge that these animals must have. Oh my god. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you can do any introduced predator trapping, you know, keep on top of those pig numbers, possum numbers, rat numbers, all of those kinds of things. There are ways we can help these snails. Thank you to my amazing crew of best friends that came out and helped me. I really couldn't have done it without you guys. And thanks to Karamea. If you have any of your own experiences with these snails, I would love to hear about it down in the comments. And remember to subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!